Welcome to RealCast, the weekly roundup of the real asset markets. My name's Richard Betts and I'm joined by Nicol Dynes, Judi, Seebus and Dan Innes. And we'll also have a special focus on senior housing and healthcare and logistics. But let's start with the roundup of the week. Judi, welcome back. What are your picks from the week?
An overview of the top 100 non-listed investment managers in real estate, which INREV published this week. It was interesting to see how big Blackstone has become in the past decade. It had nothing in Europe just a decade ago, and now worldwide it's got $250 billion of assets under management in the real estate space. So that makes it the biggest player by far in globally. The second largest is Brookfield, Canadian-based company, with 180 billion. So there's quite a distance between them. PGIM, the real estate arm of Prudential, the US insurer, is in third place at 160. And then we've got Nuveen, also a US-based company, at number 4. And if you look at the top 10, it's really interesting to see how many American companies are in that top 10. So 7 of the 10 are American. Prologis is there. They were the biggest riser this year. They rose by 25% year on year. Just over 100 billion. And if you look at the whole industry, the entire real estate industry in the past decade has tripled in value to $3.2 trillion. I mean, that's astounding.
Dan, what were some of the things you've been seeing?
It's been a very interesting week, actually. I want to talk about 3 stories. First up, Tesla, the electronic car company from the US, and they're talking about a Tesla gigafactory in the UK. These rumours sort of emerge after AM Online posted a report saying that the UK's DIT, or the Department of International Trade, was on the hunt for a 4 million square foot plot of land that could be used as a space to build this R&D centre and manufacturing plant for Tesla. And Property Week this week said that the Gravity Industrial Estate in Somerset was also marketing for it. That's great news for the UK if that's the case. Another story that's kind of filtered into the market this week is Unibail Rodamco Westfield's restructure of 5 of its French shopping centres into a new JV. And that's with Crédit Agricole and La Française. And that's got an enterprise value of €2 billion. That's with Crédit Agricole and La Française holding about 54.2% of the new JV, leaving 45.8% still with URW. And also this week, URW posted its quarterly results. Their portfolio is now €65.3 billion, of which 86% is retail. You remember they've got 90 shopping centres globally, 55 of them are in Europe and the US, and they've got 1.2 billion people visiting them every year. And so COVID has been a massive factor there. About 65 of those 90 have been allowed to reopen. The remainder of those are going to be open by the 8th of June in Spain, and also the 15th of June, obviously, is the big figure for the UK. And lastly, some interesting feedback from VIA outlets. So the CEO, Otto Ambagschir, he had a piece in Retail Week this week talking about their response to COVID. VIA had to close 8 of their 11 centres. They've got centres in 9 different countries. But after about 11 weeks of lockdown and restrictions, they've been able to reopen 7 already. And that brings the total number of open centres that they have to 10. But it really talks about these pressures landlords have now. Landlords are really trying to grapple with, what does proper distancing really mean? It's a really fascinating moment for retail landlords. And lastly, the organisers of MIPIM and MAPIC, they were due to host MAPIC Italy and their food event, the Happetite, in Milan in a few weeks' time. Both of those events have actually been cancelled for 2020, with much of their programme diverted into MAPIC in November, which is still going ahead.
We saw a good news report last week that EXPO Real is opening its doors in October because the Bavarian government allowed events organisers to open up again. So we just had that announcement, and then a couple of days later we saw that the big brokers, we're talking about the likes of CBRE, JLL, Cushman, Addison Young, that they are not going to EXPO Real this year. So that's quite a big blow. And I think what we're going to see at EXPO Real and possibly other trade fairs will become more of a local affair.
There's no doubt that everybody's very keen to get back to a position where we can go to physical events and these large-scale physical fairs, but just the restrictions based around social distancing make those much more difficult this year, I think. I mean, that's interesting. One of the reasons we launched REALX.Global this week was also just with the idea of creating a kind of global trade fair and conference where it was certain that you could come to, not having to travel, no waste, no CO2, but also the fact that senior people don't need to take a whole week out of their agenda to be there. And those, I think, will be interesting things to track, to just see how that virtual side begins to develop over this period, because it does look as though some of these things are going to be with us longer than we actually imagined they would be when MIPIM was first cancelled back in March. We also reported on and were part of the foundation of the Senior Housing and Healthcare Real Estate Association, SHHA. And I think there are going to be some more of these initiatives, because there's also a focus around that based on impact investing. And I think that's going to be one of the key trends. Nicol, just picking up on the events from this week, we obviously focused on logistics and then senior living and healthcare. What were some of your takeaways from those?
Well, senior living, it's been a sector that's obviously been growing because it's driven by demographics in Europe. Obviously, the epidemic has had a disproportionate impact on the sector, but the experts at the briefing seem to agree that the human cost was far higher than the actual financial cost. But the sector will bounce back because of high demand. And an interesting thing that's happening in the sector is becoming a lot more nuanced, because rather than being one-size-fits-all care homes, there's now a variety of offers for different levels of dependency and different services that people need. And for example, there was seemed to be agreement that assisted living will grow exponentially, and also forms of rented accommodation rather than having to buy, which is the case certainly in the UK at the moment. So different a sector very much that's evolving, and also that financing. I mean, the fact that there is faith in the sector and the prospects is shown by the fact that financing for development is readily available, because people believe that in a year or two time, obviously things will get back to normal after this crisis.
I also thought the point in the healthcare and senior living one was also looking at that there'll be an expectation of greater consolidation within that industry, as the smaller care providers are likely to be more impacted by this crisis. But also probably what that will mean is that the quality of the industry will be able to increase, because a lot of the smaller providers are not in the kind of modern facilities that help create the quality care that's needed.
Another sector that's obviously been very much in the spotlight during the pandemic has been e-commerce, and logistics has proven to be a very resilient sector in the crisis, but e-commerce in particular has grown exponentially, and there's a lot of room to grow. There seems to be a belief. At the moment in Europe, 63% of consumers buy online, 87% in the UK, and a low of 23% in Romania. But for example, Italy, which is pretty low at 38%, has seen a 300% growth in online shopping during the lockdown. And there seemed to be a belief that, yes, obviously, when shops reopen, people will rush back. To some extent, they already have in Europe. We rush back simply because of the novelty of having to be able to go to a shop again. But that this sort of habit of buying online will not go away. So people will not revert to old habits. So online will keep on growing. Online shop will keep on growing.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Nicol. Thanks, Judi. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next week for our roundup of the key themes in real assets. And we'll take a special look at Italy. But until then, thanks very much for joining us.